before you take care of the world, you got to take care of yourself. Then you got to speak it into existence to yourself, to others.
We have to look into each other's connections in our circles and invite people into our own communities.
It's time to plot, plan, strategize, and mobilize.
We need to be responsible to understand where our society is structured in ways that don't allow for people to just have a good attitude.
A lot of it too is like building up the school system and making the schools better for like just the kids.
Hi, I'm Cara Cruickshank. Welcome to Essential Stories, an independent grassroots docuseries and live roundtable discussions that give voice to people on the front lines of our world's most pressing social issues.
To move into our Q&A segment, I guess what I want to ask the panel, and this is a conversational segment, so you guys can just jump in with responses to the questions as you feel inspired. I don't know if you all have heard of the term law of attraction, but that's a thing in the metaphysical world, you know, whether it's a philosophy or a spirituality that people talk about. There was a movie some years ago called The Secret. But the whole principle and premise of that is like what we think about, we create. So, you know, what we fear, where we give our energy, that's what we experience. And for those who live relatively comfortable lives, that's a really fun concept because, you know, when you have what you need and you want more of fun stuff, it's easy to kind of sit and conceptualize that and create more stuff. But when you don't have what you need, it's a lot harder to get into a mindset of feeling aligned with things that you want or desire. I'm sure we've all had those experiences, whether we've wanted a new car or a new relationship or a healthier body or whatever the situation might call for. But when we're feeling depressed, when we're feeling hopeless, when we're feeling in pain of any emotionally or psychologically or physically, it's a lot harder to shift in our mindset a different reality. And that with trauma is a thing in terms of obstacles to get over psychologically and emotionally. So in creating a new reality beyond racism, you know, what might be some of the internal steps that we can take, as well as maybe immediate community steps, because right now a lot of the focus on Black Lives Matter is on the national level and even the global level, which is fantastic and important. But we also need to attend on the personal level. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on what is the inner landscape and the inner journey to finding that new reality.
I have some thoughts on that because I actually have a problem with that whole concept of, you know, you create your own reality, because there's tremendous privilege that goes with that. And if you're someone who cannot figure out how to put food on the table for your kid, or you're working 3 jobs and you barely see your kid, and so you're grappling with feeling like the worst parent in the whole world, you don't have the time or the space or the emotional energy to deal with that. And I feel like that is actually a way that we put the blame on people who are being victimized by the structures of our society. So I actually think that the thing to do is to recognize that. I mean, there's a part of that that makes sense, because yes, if you walk around saying all the time, my life is terrible, my life is terrible, well, yeah, you know, it doesn't matter how great your life looks from the outside, that's going to be your experience. But the reverse is not necessarily true. And I think we need to be responsible to understand where our society is structured in ways that don't allow for people to just have a good attitude and have that make a difference. But okay, so that being said, I do think that I think there's a difference between having a good attitude and having a vision for the future that feels empowering and larger than yourself. And that is where a lot of the energy comes from. I mean, you know, people whose vision for the future is, if it's the last thing I do, my kids are going to have opportunities that I didn't have. And that drives them. And that's why they do the 3 jobs. And that's why they make all of the sacrifices. And it's hard, but they do it and it works for them. And that feels empowering. The other stuff always feels like you're blaming the victim to me.
Can I respond to that? I'll just have a dialogue about that. I think that is an excellent point. I think, you know, even the awareness of knowing the law of attraction is a privilege. Like having that education and being able to understand like universal laws and like the metaphysics of it, like it's a real thing that you acknowledge and have in your response. But, you know, putting that as, you know, a solution to something that is so heavy and ingrained and, you know, suppressed on these victims, I completely hear that. This is what I'll say is that, like, it has to do with a focus that, you know, some of these victims and these, you know, children and families can focus on, that has to do under that same umbrella of the law of attraction, is just unlearn, or, you know, as JELANI was saying, having the self-esteem and just being very cautious of the words that we use, and just like, you know, saying that we can't do something, or just even just the opportunities of where, like, what getting out of the ghetto looks like, as far as having that as far as the law of attraction ingrained in the youth, of seeing actual avenues of getting out and believing that wholeheartedly and manifesting that. I think that is possible. And it's not, you know, and I'm not saying you're not, but I just want to have that dialogue.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think
jump in real quick. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to clarify that the question was stated in exactly the premise that is a perspective of privilege. That's why I went into the example of when you have a lot of stuff, it's easy to think about more fun stuff to have. When you don't have a lot of stuff, it's very hard to shift to any preferable reality because you're suffering and you're in pain, or you're worried, or you're stressed. Assuming that it's a perspective of luxury or privilege to have the leisure to do that, every individual, no matter where we come from, every child wants to dream about who they might be when they grow up, right? Not every child gets to have that dream. Not every child gets to imagine or even gets asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? The same is true at any phase of our development, you know, whether we're teenagers or adults, the human being wants to expand and grow and experience in the context of fight, flight, or freeze, and being in that on a day-to-day crisis-based level, which many people in the lower tiers of socioeconomic reality in the US and other places are. The question is, what does the process, the inside journey of healing that trauma and shifting out of fight, flight, or freeze look like? And how do we facilitate that while also battling all these systems? And also tied to that question is, you know, just as activists are out storming streets and police departments and buildings and everything else right now around the country and in other countries, you know, there's also the balance of taking care of oneself as an activist. You know, if we burn out, we can't do a lot. If we get if we go to jail and can't get bail, or if we get, you know, brutalized by the cops, then we can't continue our activism. So there is this question of how do we maintain self-care and heal trauma while also fighting these battles.
Cara, if I could step in. First of all, I'm glad the just explaining who we are and what we do is over, because now I can just talk from the heart, and I'm so glad for that. That's more my speed, and I don't know about the rest of you, but that's me. Second, it's so interesting to bring up this topic of law of attraction and the fight or flight mentality, because people often forget that they sometimes think, oh, how come you know, I'm not surrounded by these people who are they're interested in this type of work, this type of whatever, because they don't know enough about themselves. That work that you're saying, that self-love. Dr. Shad Homestetter wrote a great book about self-talk. You know, and you have to, and this is for everyone around the world, where we can all benefit from self-talk, in that, okay, we know where we are, but we can speak life, we can speak positive, we can speak good things in the right direction, so that way the law of attraction can grow from that seed of speaking right. So you have the seed of speaking good, you're speaking all these things that you want, you dream of, all these great things, but then it's now out to the world. You say it, so you say it to other people, you're positive, and everyone's like, why are you so positive? Where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? But you'll notice, you'll begin to draw those people to you. And that is what everybody, doesn't matter, black, white, brown, yellow, purple, doesn't matter. That mindset, that heart set of, oh, I needed to fix myself first. I needed to focus on myself first, find where I stand with, you know, my thoughts, feelings, emotions. And then I spoke it into existence where I wanted to be. And now I'm sharing it with others, and now it's slowly coming to fruition. So just over time, if you continue to do it, then your fight, flight, or I forget the third, will become a more, you're more ready to fight. You're more equipped for taking on the discussion, the tough discussion with someone when they disagree with you or whatever, and you're like, oh, this person did this, such as this, that, and the third. You're like, oh, wait a second, did they really do that, or did you see it as, you know what I mean? So it's from a self standpoint first, and then when you continue to speak it into existence, speak into your back of your mind, because you listen to yourself 24/7. OMKARI, Miles, you know that you speak to yourself 24/7. You can't turn your brain off if you wanted to. So the end of the day, it's getting it right with you, where you want to be as far as your feelings, emotions, and all the great stuff. Spirituality as well, just like Miles brought up as well, and you as well, Cara. But initially, before you take care of the world, you got to take care of yourself. Then you got to speak it into existence to yourself, to others, and then feel confident in doing it. And then you just continue the process, and then they latch onto it. Now birds of a feather flock together. That's why we're all here on this panel, because we're feeling that pull for a better society in general.
You know, Joe, I want to jump in there and just say that I think that there's definitely an aspect to what you're saying that I agree with. And I also feel like one of the things that people have to wrestle with is that for people who are living in poverty, for people who have a lot of trauma, I think that the process doesn't even begin until their stories are heard, until their stories are told and heard. And that once you've gotten through that point, then you have the possibility of moving into a different relationship with yourself to start with, and then with the world moving outward.
if I could jump in, I was on that train of thought, because I do think it's, you know, with fight, flight, or freeze, that's real. It's survival, and you're in a state where unless you have resources to be able to move past that, right? Whether it's because you are experiencing gender-based violence, or you're out on the streets without a home, or you're constantly fending for yourself in a moment of survival, that gets stored within you. And unless you have the resources, and we know far too often there's communities who are gentrified or pushed out or called the ghetto or the hood or whatever it is that we coined these areas as, there's no resources explicitly handed out to a lot of communities. And so what happens is I start to think about people like us who have platforms, who are connected to community, how often that saves us. Like, communities that I'm part of are so crucial to my own ability to sit in a circle and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and I don't have this resource, and I know that we're connected to people that might have that resource, or someone knows someone who is connected and can be able to help, whether that, and resources meaning not just financial, but in terms of mental health, and in terms of housing, in terms of all of these things that we need in order to be able to safely survive in this world. And the communities that aren't provided that straight up up front, we have to look into each other's connections in our circles and invite people into our own communities, and be able to bring them into a space where they can say, I'm a mess right now mentally, but I'm really glad to be in this circle, and I'm really glad to be connected to you guys right now, because that has the ability to where they can just be human, where they can walk into a community center and say, you know, I need help. And we need to be able to get out of our own comfort to increase that empathy and provide comfort and support to one another when we have the resources. Everyone on this panel is connected to people with resources. And so we know people that if they were to reach out and ask for help, we need to set aside our time and our lives and all of these things that need to take the back seat sometimes, and be able to really be there and show up for people. Because I really do feel like within first circles and second circles, like, there are people that are doing the work, and there are also people that need connection, and we're social beings. We thrive off of feeling connected, feeling heard, just feeling like we can be human around each other and not be chastised or put down. So I do feel like community has a lot of power, and community can mean many things. So that's kind of where I was headed with my thought process around all of this. So, because it's resources, right? It's like, you're not going to get to a therapy room if you don't have someone watching over your kids, so that you can take the bus to wherever this therapy room is. And then, you know, is it culturally specific? Is it financially accessible, right? The resources that we connect each other with need to be appropriate. And I just feel like we have a lot of wealth of knowledge in our own communities that we need to share.
So I'm just going to recap, and then Miles, you can take it. So I'm hearing from OMKARI, that was an excellent point about, you know, having a forum to be able to tell your story and have it be heard and received as a starting place for inner healing, and for just feeling acknowledged in one's struggle. And Ravina, to your point around the importance of shared experience and being heard on multiple levels in a group setting of some kind that feels safe, and having community as a resource is crucial. So yeah, go ahead, Miles.
Circling back to the conversation that we're having about the law of attraction, without getting stuck there, I wanted to introduce the topic on, once more, just reiterating the privilege of awareness and choice. When we were talking about, you know, it starts inside, and, you know, we can choose the words that we're thinking of. Let's think about the vocabulary of the actual words that we have in our heads to begin with. When we're talking about how to make this change and how to get to a place of being able to speak in law of attraction, two things. You know, we need to make sure that we're getting these babies fed the nutritional value to be able to be, you know, to have the self-care. So it's not, you know, going back and unlearning things and, you know, unpacking trauma, even though that might be a part of it. The two things I was going to say is, like, you know, education and media. They're taught, you know, subconsciously before consciously, and in children's most malleable, you know, ages, in their environments, in their school systems, not feeling like they matter, not getting information that is, you know, accurate history. There's all these different things that, you know, alter the cards that are dealt when it comes to being able to have self-esteem or, you know, self-awareness, and, you know, therefore the law of attraction. So I think, you know, focusing on the media and education that children are getting to set them up to be able to have the law of attraction work in their favor.
Is there anything else? And I apologize for not articulating my question better. It's, you know, something I guess that I myself am still sort of exploring and trying to find articulation for. But I do want to see more communities in our crazy nation, not only having resources that everyone deserves, but also having access to ways of self-love, I guess, that are absent when in that mode of fight, flight, and freeze. So back to the original intent of this topic tonight, with the post-traumatic stress from generations of slavery, that compounds what is already current day-to-day trauma. So it's sandwiched, right? Two levels of trauma. One is generational and sort of inherited in one's DNA. I say R, but the greater R. And one is the experience of whatever is going on. And so, you know, with that, with one compounding the other, there's even more need for these things that you're speaking about. We obviously can talk on the material plane of the resources needed, and that's a given, again, of how much there is to do in that arena. But in terms of the storytelling, in terms of community, in terms of moral and emotional and psychological support, Joe, in particular, I'm curious to know, as someone who works with the homeless community, what have you seen as working in that arena of support for psychological and emotional trauma? And anyone else who wants to chime in on that, like what do you see being effective? What do you see as successful steps or successful for individuals that are maybe even discovering it on their own terms?
Initially, you know, when someone comes to the bus, and my first time down to the bus was when I was 13 years old. I was freaked out all day, but everyone who I met and served soup and drink to, served bread to, they were all friends. They were all dressed the same. There was no preconceived notion of, you know, who's homeless, who's not. We were all just human. That's all we were. What we shoot for initially is breaking bread together, and then having a space to personalize situation. And it's so crazy to hear some of these people that, you know, in conversation, the first thing that they love to feel about themselves is just having someone else recognize them, learn their name, find out what's going on, and then whenever we have a topic or a chance or a point in the conversation, we can say, so how did you get here? How did that happen? You know, black, white, purple, red, doesn't matter. It can happen to anyone. B, it's not forever, but most importantly, C is what we learn from it and how we potentially start to the steps to get out. You know, and I'm sure some of you people have definitely heard, I mean, I'd imagine you've heard a saying of, it's not what you know, but who you know. And it's, you know, that is essentially, okay, if for someone who's unfortunately homeless, that is, we need to warm up to them. We have to earn their trust to say, for them to say, oh, wow, okay, so you may have a connection for me. You may have a number to call. You may have a direction, again, to lead me to. And then they start to feel hope. Okay, now they open up. Now they, you know, when we go and reach for that life transformation in total, there are steps to it. So learning about the person, learning about how they got to where they got to, you know, good, bad, and different, how all those things, the end of after the equal sign, how it all come to that. Now we talk about it, we find out how to piece together a potential place to house them. They may need clothes or job opportunities. A lot of people and very much a lot of the members and who are homeless are facing some type of addiction. It's just amazingly overwhelming, and it's a lot. But again, you can't fix it in one day, but you have to fix it right away. You have to approach it quickly, and there has to be follow up. And it's not one person there. You know, it takes a village. So for me, at least, when it comes to this and seeing how New York City Relief operates the mobile outreach, but more importantly, when sharing it with the, you know, regular society, you know, talking to people about what's going on, it's just, you peel it away like an onion. It's just a conversation. You peel back the onion, and then you go deeper and deeper into, oh wow, you like this whole process of taking a deeper look at the whole hashtag Black Lives Matter. It's not about the moment of it, it's the movement, and there are people behind all of them. Everyone on this call has a personal story of bad and good, and we keep fighting and striving for the good. That's really what we're all trying to, you know, hope for. And that's really that's how New York City Relief has instilled me the just that personal one-on-one time to, you know, can't take the whole thing on it once, but I can see how far I can get with this one person.
So yeah, what I'm hearing is the importance of humanizing humans, essentially, acknowledging that somebody has a name, and you know, sharing a meal with them, and relating on an equal level rather than any other. So thanks for that element to the conversation. Did anybody else want to add anything to this exploration? I feel like we got a little bit into the weeds in terms of which direction we're taking it and why, which, you know, it happens, but I would love to invite any other additions or angles to the core question, if you have one.
I would say that we should educate people. Like, I would say, like, especially in the hood or in the ghetto, like, we gotta educate people, like, because like the school systems were kind of shit growing up as a kid, and I felt like I wasn't really equipped to deal with the real world. I feel like a lot of the school systems are shit, and they don't really prepare us for the real world. Cause like I'm like like after I got out of high school, like I had no fucking clue. I ended up out on the street, and like, you know, like the school doesn't really prepare us for that much, and especially in like, especially if you're going to school in the hood, like you get in fights, you get into all kinds of shit that, you know, if you go to like a white school, like you won't have to really deal with that. And so like I think a lot of it too is like building up the school system and making the schools better for like just the kids, because what they're learning now is like what they're gonna be in the future. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I mean, I often think of things from like a younger like baby standpoint of education, and it's oftentimes, you know, we hear like now the discourse like in some of the conversations that I've been part of is like it's from the womb, you know, like the way that you're um for lack of like better words, like the way your life is going to be set up is often determined by the circumstance outside of your mother's womb, in that home, in that neighborhood, in that wherever, whatever resources are there, you know, access to healthcare, whatever it is. All of these things have the environment has so many effects on where our kids end up and where they, you know, and schools have like a really brutal way of standardizing kids into numbers, into grades, into scores, into standardization, so on and so forth. And we lose that human aspect. We have a classroom of children that are all, we forget that they're all creative minds and they all have a voice. And we often, the school system will just push their agenda on our kids because there's a bigger agenda that they have at play to produce products of an institution. And so 1,000% we need to like uphold how powerful, like even like a kindergarten classroom is. Like there's so much you can teach them if they can internalize all this hate that people are teaching them at that age. Do you know what they could do in the other spectrum of it? If we are like teaching them social and emotional skills, emotional literacy, they're aware of the world. We just, adults or people in authority have a way of saying like they're little, so they don't matter or whatever. But those the kids that are going to carry us forward. So when you think about the term movement implies that there's direction, right? So we have to think of like whatever pace it's at, we have to move forward, and it's, you have to unlearn and unpack along the way. Yeah, but if our schools were strengthened in a way where our kids were able to uplift things like art, creativity, really whatever the hell it is that they're interested in at that age. Like there's so much wisdom that comes from kids that we undermine. Like I'm sure all of us have had conversations with young people and we're like, oh, like that makes a lot of sense. And we tarnish their thoughts as they go forward, and developmentally speaking, it just does so much. And I'm sure all of us have experiences of like, well, the things that we've been through and the oppressive structure that is school taught us a certain way. And so we have to like decolonize our thinking and like really uphold teachers and educators who have that framework of not seeing kids as numbers or products, because I mean, they grew up into us. So, you know, so I think about that often.
Going back to children being very malleable and, you know, being able to influence them consciously and subconsciously. There's a lot, like you said, they understand this world, but, you know, obviously they're not able of completely understanding this world. So then we got to get into, you know, representation and just like, you know, the subconscious belief system and self-esteem and just like opportunities that we were talking about before. And this next part that I'm going to talk about is after education. It's like, this is directly to anybody who, you know, is privileged to have education and, you know, is trying to do something. Everybody on this panel, you know, we are here with laptops. Like let's talk. So Killer Mike is an incredible leader, especially in the hip hop community. Everybody should know him. If you don't, check out Killer Mike, right? So he has these 4 action plans. That is a very, you know, quick step, digestible, you know, just, you know, repeat it to whoever. And this is how we got to move. It's like, you know, it's time to plot, plan, strategize, and mobilize. And that once you have the education and you're trying to do something about it, it's up to us to, you know, actually come together and think about how, not necessarily what. Obviously we want equality, obviously we want equity. It's about how, it's about strategizing, it's about, you know, coming up with, you know, content or events like this and, you know, coming together. And I think if everybody starts with themselves and then they get a couple people on board, and then that's strength in numbers, and you get people in a community doing something, right? Now it feels like the leaders are stepping up, and, you know, the creators that are really creative, especially during these COVID times, are getting creative with how to, you know, galvanize it, how to get information out. Just even with Instagram, and, you know, you're constantly, we're getting these brands, not these big corporation brands, but like, you know, these people are getting out messaging, right? So strength is in numbers. If we can get all these little organizations, you know, the Black Dollar boycotts, to do a crossover episode with the homeless, and then, you know, with the people that are, you know, everybody's chipping in and chipping away at their own sector. I feel like the next step after is like having these, you know, cross-pollinating, you know, meeting of the minds, meeting of the movements, so we can continue growing strength in numbers and moving forward together.
Like, share, and subscribe so that we can make sure that these essential stories are heard by more people.